The text message arrived at exactly 11:47 p.m., right as I was finishing my third cup of coffee and grading another stack of algebra tests that proved my students had collectively forgotten everything I'd taught them about quadratic equations. Don't wait up. Goodbye. Clara. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I stared at the screen of my phone, reading those 5 words over and over again. After 12 years of marriage, my wife Clara had just ended our relationship with a text message shorter than most of my students' homework excuses. My name is Leonard Hayes, and I teach high school mathematics in Millbrook, Maine, one of those mid-sized towns where everyone knows everyone else's business, and gossip travels faster than bad news. At 34, I'd settled into what I thought was a comfortable routine, teaching derivatives and integrals to disinterested teenagers by day, coming home to Clara by night, and spending weekends grading papers while she scrolled through social media. I should have seen the signs earlier. The new lingerie she claimed was just for herself, the mysterious phone calls she'd take in the bathroom, the sudden interest in girls' trips with friends she'd barely mentioned before, the way she'd started dressing like she was interviewing for a job at a fashion magazine instead of her usual corporate recruiting position. But the final clue had been sitting right there in our joint bank account. 3 ATM withdrawals totaling $800 over the past week, all from locations I'd never heard of. I tried calling her immediately, straight to voicemail. I tried texting back, message undelivered. She'd blocked me on everything. Phone, social media, even our shared Netflix account was suddenly asking for a password I didn't know. "Well, Clara," I said aloud to our empty living room, "looks like you just solved for X by eliminating yourself from the equation." I spent the next hour doing what any rational person would do in my situation. I went completely irrational. I called her sister, her mother, her work friends. No one answered. It was like Clara had vanished into thin air, taking half my life with her. That's when I remembered Brenda Walsh, Clara's closest friend and the biggest gossip in 3 counties. If anyone knew where Clara had gone, it would be Brenda. But I needed leverage. I pulled out my laptop and crafted a carefully worded text message to Brenda. "Hi, Brenda. It's Leonard. Clara left tonight and I'm worried about her safety. I've already contacted the police and given them access to our home security footage. If you know anything about where she might be, please call me immediately." It was a complete bluff, of course. We didn't have security cameras and I hadn't called the police, but Brenda didn't know that. I hit send and waited exactly 3 minutes before my phone exploded with an incoming call. "Leonard! Oh my God, what security footage? What did you see?" Brenda's voice was pitched so high it could shatter glass. "Hello, Brenda. I'm glad you called. Clara left me a goodbye text and disappeared. I'm just trying to understand what happened." "Security footage, Leonard. What security footage?" "Just some cameras I installed last month. Nothing too invasive, just the usual home security stuff." "Why? Is there something specific I should be looking for?" The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long I thought she'd hung up. "Brenda, are you there?" I need to find Clara. I need to talk to her right away." "That makes 2 of us. Any idea where she might be?" I'll call you back." She hung up, and I couldn't help but smile. One text message, one carefully placed bluff, and Clara's house of cards was already starting to wobble. I spent the rest of the night doing something I should have done months ago, paying attention to details. I went through our bedroom with the methodical precision I usually reserved for checking calculus homework. Hidden in the back of Clara's jewelry box, I found a credit card I'd never seen before. Tucked behind her mirror, a business card for a divorce attorney in Portland. But the real prize was in her desk drawer. Printed emails between Clara and someone named Richard Dale discussing our weekend getaway and when you finally leave him. Richard Dale. I knew that name. He owned Dale's Auto Sales on Route 1, one of those flashy car dealerships with the inflatable gorillas and "no credit, no problem" banners. I'd seen his commercials on local TV, a guy in his early 40s with too much hair gel and a smile that belonged in a toothpaste ad. So Clara hadn't just left me. She'd left me for a used car salesman with a midlife crisis and a taste for married women. I made myself another cup of coffee and opened my laptop. If Clara wanted to play games, I'd show her what happened when you challenged someone who'd spent 15 years teaching teenagers that every problem has a solution. You just need to know which formula to apply. First, I filed for divorce online. Maine's no-fault divorce laws meant I didn't need to prove adultery, just irreconcilable differences. I could have the papers ready in 48 hours. Second, I changed the locks on our house. Technically, our house, but since Clara had abandoned it, I figured possession was 9/10 of the law. Third, I actually did install security cameras. If I was going to bluff about surveillance footage, I might as well make it real. By sunrise, my phone had 63 missed calls. Clara's friends, her sister, her mother, even her boss from the recruiting firm. Word was spreading through Millbrook's gossip network like wildfire, and I was sitting at the center of it with a cup of coffee and a calculator, ready to solve the biggest equation of my life. The variable Clara had forgotten to account for was simple. Leonard Hayes wasn't just a mild-mannered math teacher. He was a mild-mannered math teacher with nothing left to lose. By Monday morning, I'd transformed from abandoned husband into something much more dangerous, a man with a plan and the patience to execute it perfectly. My first stop was Clara's apartment. Yes, apartment. Plural residence was apparently another detail she'd forgotten to mention. I'd found the lease agreement in her desk, a luxury one-bedroom downtown that cost more per month than I made in 6 weeks of teaching. The apartment manager, Mr. Willard, was exactly the kind of person I'd hoped to meet. 60-something, nosy, and clearly irritated by his younger tenant's behavior. "You're Clara's husband?" He looked me up and down, taking in my sensible khakis and button-down shirt. "She said she was single." "Interesting. How long has she been renting from you?" 8 months. Always pays cash. Always has different men coming and going at all hours. Some of us run a respectable building, you know." I nodded sympathetically. "I'm actually here about a legal matter. Clara abandoned our marriage, and I'm trying to inventory all our shared assets. This apartment was paid for with funds from our joint account." This was technically true. The $800 in ATM withdrawals had come from money we'd both contributed to. Mr. Willard's eyes lit up with the gleam of a man who'd finally found an excuse to act on months of irritation. "Joint account, you say? Because the lease specifically states no subletting, no unauthorized occupants, and definitely no using the premises for questionable activities." "What kind of questionable activities?" "Let's just say your wife has been very popular with the local business community. That car dealer, Richard Dale, has been here so often I was starting to think he'd moved in." I pulled out my phone and showed him a photo of Clara. "Just to confirm we're talking about the same person?" "Oh, that's her all right. Always dressed like she's going to some fancy party, always on her phone, always acting like she's too good to say hello in the hallway." "Mr. Willard, I hate to ask this, but do you happen to have security cameras in the building?" His smile could have powered half of Maine. "Motion activated, high definition, and backed up to cloud storage. Why do you ask?" "Just trying to establish a timeline for legal purposes." "When did you last see Clara?" "Friday evening. She left with 2 suitcases and that Dale character. Haven't seen her since." I thanked Mr. Willard and left him with my phone number, along with a suggestion that he might want to review Clara's lease agreement for any violations. Something told me Clara's luxury apartment was about to become significantly less comfortable. My next stop was the Sine Curve, the local bar where Millbrook's teachers gathered every Monday to recover from another week of educational warfare. I needed to talk to Coach Melvin Rodriguez, my closest friend and the only person in town who could bench press a Volkswagen. I found Melvin at his usual spot at the bar, nursing a beer and complaining about the school board's latest budget cuts to the athletic department. "Leonard, how was your weekend? Clara get back from her girls' trip, okay?" "Actually, Melvin, that's what I need to talk to you about." I gave him the abbreviated version: the goodbye text, the blocked communications, the secret apartment, and Richard Dale. Melvin's expression grew darker with each detail. "That piece of garbage," he growled. "I never liked that guy. Always trying to hit on the younger teachers at school events. Always talking about his expensive cars like they make up for his complete lack of personality." "I'm going to need your help with something, Melvin. But first, I need to know, are you willing to bend a few rules if it means teaching some people a lesson about consequences?" Melvin drained his beer and looked me straight in the eye. "Leonard, you're the smartest guy I know, and you've been nothing but good to Clara for 12 years. If she's stupid enough to throw that away for a used car salesman, then she deserves whatever equation you're about to solve." "Good, because I'm about to show Richard Dale what happens when you mess with a teacher's variables." The next morning, I drove to Dale's auto sales during my lunch break. The lot was exactly what I'd expected: rows of overpriced cars with sale stickers, inflatable decorations, and enough neon to be seen from space. Richard Dale was easy to spot. He was standing next to a red convertible, gesturing wildly while talking to a young couple who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. He was shorter than I'd expected, with the kind of artificial tan that comes from a bottle and hair that defied both gravity and good taste. I waited until the couple escaped, then approached with my best customer smile. "Mr. Dale, I'm interested in test driving that convertible." His eyes lit up with dollar signs. "Excellent choice. This baby's got low mileage, leather seats, and a sound system that'll make your neighbors jealous. You looking to impress someone special?" "Actually, yes. My wife just left me, and I figure it's time to upgrade everything in my life." "Sorry to hear about the wife, but you're absolutely right about upgrading. Life's too short to drive boring cars and stay with boring women. I always tell my customers, trade up whenever you get the chance." I almost laughed out loud. Richard Dale was actually giving me relationship advice about my own wife. "Mind if I take it for a spin? I like to really test a car before I commit to anything." "Of course. Let me grab the keys." 5 minutes later, we were driving down Route 1 with Richard in the passenger seat, rattling off sales pitches about horsepower and financing options. I waited until we were well outside of town before pulling into an empty parking lot behind an abandoned gas station. "Why are we stopping?" Richard asked, his salesman's smile faltering slightly. I turned off the engine and engaged the door locks. "Because we need to have a conversation about Clara Hayes." The color drained from Richard's face so fast I thought he might pass out. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Really? Because I have emails, credit card receipts, and about 50 witnesses who saw you leaving her apartment with suitcases on Friday night. Plus, her friend Brenda is so panicked about security footage that she's been calling Clara every 10 minutes since Saturday." "Look, man, I didn't know she was married when we started talking. She told me she was divorced." "When did you start talking, Richard?" "I don't have to tell you anything. Unlock these doors right now or I'll call the police." I pulled out my phone and showed him a photo I'd taken of Clara's emails. "Go ahead and call them. I'd love to explain to Officer Martinez how you've been helping a married woman steal money from joint bank accounts to fund your little love nest." Richard stared at the phone screen, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. "Here's what's going to happen," I continued in the same calm voice I used to explain calculus to confused students. "You're going to stop seeing my wife, you're going to stop financing her lifestyle, and you're going to stay away from both of us while we sort out our divorce." "And if I don't?" "Then I'll make sure everyone in Millbrook knows exactly what kind of business practices you use to attract customers. How do you think your sales will be when every married woman in town warns her husband about the car dealer who specializes in breaking up families?" I unlocked the doors and started the engine. "Think about it, Richard. In mathematics, we call it a cost-benefit analysis. Is Clara really worth losing your business over? We drove back to the dealership in silence. As Richard got out of the car, I rolled down the window. "Oh, and Richard, you might want to check your tires. I think one of them looks a little flat." I drove away, leaving him standing next to the convertible with 4 slashed tires and a puddle of maple syrup soaking into his precious leather seats. As I headed back to school, I couldn't help but smile. Clara had taught me something valuable after all. Sometimes the best way to solve a problem is to change all the variables at once. Wednesday evening brought Millbrook High's monthly parent-teacher conference night, and I'd spent the entire week preparing for the most important presentation of my career. Not about mathematics, about consequences. I'd made 3 phone calls that afternoon. The first was to Principal Dorsey, asking if I could use the Maine auditorium's projector for a special presentation about student achievement. The second was to Coach Melvin, asking him to help with crowd control during the evening. The third was to Clara's phone, which was no longer blocked, leaving a voicemail about important legal documents that require her signature tonight at the school. Clara, predictably, had called back within an hour. "Leonard, what legal documents? My lawyer said you can't force me to sign anything." "It's about the house, Clara, and the joint accounts. If you want to avoid having this drag out for months, you should probably show up." "Fine. What time?" 7:30. Meet me in the main auditorium." What Clara didn't know was that parent-teacher night always packed the auditorium with half the town's adults. What she also didn't know was that her friend Brenda had been so worried about my fictional security footage that she'd spent the past 3 days telling everyone who would listen about Clara's situation. By 7 o'clock, the auditorium was buzzing with the usual crowd of parents, teachers, and school board members. I'd positioned myself at the front with my laptop connected to the projector, ostensibly reviewing my presentation materials. Principal Dorsey approached my table. "Leonard, I'm so sorry to hear about Clara. If you need to take some personal time..." "Actually, Mrs. Dorsey, I think tonight might provide some closure. Clara's been spreading some rumors about me around town, and I'd like to set the record straight." Mrs. Dorsey raised an eyebrow. She'd been principal for 15 years and had developed a 6th sense for drama. "What kind of rumors?" "She's been telling people that I was controlling and abusive, that she had to escape from our marriage in fear for her safety. I think the community deserves to know the truth." This was a calculated risk, but I knew Mrs. Dorsey well enough to predict her reaction. She hated false accusations against her teachers, and she loved being the first to know about local scandals. "What do you need from me, Leonard?" "Just your support when Clara arrives. I have some evidence I'd like to share with everyone." At exactly 7:30, Clara walked through the auditorium doors, wearing a designer dress I'd never seen before and enough jewelry to fund a small school district. She looked confident, almost defiant, as she scanned the crowd for me. That confidence lasted about 10 seconds, just long enough for her to realize that half of Millbrook was staring at her with expressions ranging from curiosity to outright hostility. "Ladies and gentlemen," I announced, standing up and activating the projector. "I'd like to take a moment to address some rumors that have been circulating about my personal life." Clara froze in the center aisle, her face going pale as the first slide appeared on the screen, her goodbye text message, enlarged to fill the entire wall. "My wife Clara sent me this message on Saturday night," I continued in my best teacher voice, after cleaning out our joint bank account and moving in with her boyfriend Richard Dale. The auditorium erupted in whispers. Clara tried to turn and leave, but Coach Melvin had positioned himself by the doors, arms crossed, blocking her exit with his considerable bulk. "Leonard, stop this right now," Clara hissed, but her voice was lost in the growing murmur of the crowd. I clicked to the next slide, a photo of Clara and Richard together, taken from her own Instagram account. This photo was posted while Clara was supposedly on a girls' trip with friends. As you can see, her travel companion was actually Mr. Dale, a married man who owns the auto dealership on Route 1. More whispers, louder now. I could see Brenda in the third row, her face bright red, frantically texting on her phone. Now, Clara has been telling people that she left because I was abusive and controlling. I'd like to address those allegations directly. I clicked to the next slide, a bank statement showing Clara's ATM withdrawals and the lease agreement for her secret apartment. These documents show that Clara has been planning her departure for at least 8 months, using our joint funds to finance a separate residence where she could conduct her affair. If I was truly abusive, would she have had the freedom to maintain a secret apartment, secret credit cards, and a secret relationship? Clara finally found her voice. You have no right to share private information. This is harassment. Actually, Clara, this is evidence in our divorce proceedings. Everything I'm showing was obtained legally from our shared assets and your public social media accounts. I clicked to the final slide. The divorce papers I'd filed, clearly showing that Clara had abandoned our marriage. I want everyone to understand that I'm not the one who destroyed our family. I'm not the one who lied, cheated, and stole. I'm just the one who's finally telling the truth. The auditorium was completely silent now, 200 pairs of eyes focused on Clara, who stood frozen in the aisle like a deer in headlights. That's when Richard Dale burst through the back doors, clearly having been summoned by one of Clara's frantic text messages. "That's enough!" he shouted, striding down the aisle toward the front. "You can't humiliate her like this in front of the whole town." I smiled and clicked my laptop one more time. The projector now showed a simple text slide. Richard Dale, married father of 2, owner of Dale's Auto Sales. You're absolutely right, Richard. Let's talk about humiliation. How do you think your wife Linda feels about your 8-month affair? How do you think your customers will feel when they learn that you use your business to pick up married women? Richard stopped in his tracks, the red liquid draining from his face, as he realized that everyone in the auditorium now knew exactly who he was and what he'd been doing. I have security footage of you and Clara together, I continued, along with financial records showing how you've been funding her lifestyle. I also have witness statements from her apartment building about your frequent overnight visits. This was still mostly bluff. I had some evidence, but not nearly as much as I was claiming. But Richard didn't know that, and neither did Clara. "Leonard, please," Clara said, her voice breaking. "Can we just talk about this privately?" We could have talked privately any time in the past 8 months, Clara. You chose to make this public when you decided to abandon our marriage via text message and spread lies about me around town. I closed my laptop and looked out at the crowd of parents and teachers who'd known me for years. I want everyone to understand that I'm not looking for sympathy or revenge. I just want the truth to be known. Clara made her choice, and now she has to live with the consequences of that choice. Principal Dorsey stood up and began applauding. Within seconds, the entire auditorium joined her, not applauding for Clara's humiliation, but for my dignity in the face of betrayal. Clara turned and ran for the exit, pushing past Coach Melvin and disappearing into the parking lot. Richard followed her, but not before shooting me a look of pure hatred. As the crowd began to disperse, Mrs. Dorsey approached my table. "Leonard, I had no idea you were dealing with all of this. If you need any support from the school administration..." "Thank you, Mrs. Dorsey. I think the worst is behind me now." But I was wrong. The worst was still to come, and it would arrive in the form of 2 desperate people with nothing left to lose and a very bad plan for getting their revenge. Thursday night at 11:15, my new security cameras detected motion in my driveway. I was in my home office, grading papers and enjoying the first peaceful evening I'd had in a week, when my phone buzzed with an alert from the surveillance system. The camera feed showed Clara's car parked behind my house and 2 figures moving toward my back door with flashlights. Even in the grainy night vision footage, I could clearly identify Clara and Richard attempting to break into my home. I called Coach Melvin first. "They're here," I whispered into the phone. "Clara and Richard are trying to break in through the back door." "On my way. Don't confront them alone, Leonard. Call the police. Already dialing. My second call was to 911, reporting a burglary in progress at my address. The dispatcher assured me that officers were en route, but I knew it would take at least 10 minutes for anyone to arrive. In a town the size of Millbrook, we only had 3 patrol cars, and they covered a lot of territory. I grabbed my baseball bat and positioned myself where I could see both the front and back entrances to my house. Through the kitchen window, I could hear Clara and Richard arguing in harsh whispers. "The key doesn't work. He changed the locks." "Then we break a window. We need to get those papers before the police see them." What papers? I wondered. Then I realized they must be talking about the evidence I'd shown at the school. The bank statements, emails, and lease agreement. They probably thought I had even more incriminating material hidden somewhere in the house. The sound of breaking glass came from my bedroom window. They were actually doing it, breaking into my house like common criminals. I almost felt sorry for them. Almost. I heard footsteps in my bedroom, then Clara's voice. "Check his desk. Look for anything with Richard's name on it." "I can't see anything. Where are the lights?" "Don't turn on any lights, you idiot. The neighbors will see." Coach Melvin's pickup truck roared into my driveway just as I heard Clara and Richard moving toward my home office. I met Melvin at the front door, holding my finger to my lips and pointing toward the back of the house. Melvin nodded and pulled out his phone, switching on the video recording function. If we were going to confront 2 burglars, we might as well document it properly. "Clara!" I called out loudly. "I know you're in there! The police are on their way!" The footsteps stopped immediately, followed by panicked whispering. "Leonard?" Clara's voice was shaky now. "We just came to get some of my things." "By breaking my bedroom window? That's called burglary, Clara. It's a felony." I heard them moving toward the back door, probably planning to escape the same way they'd entered. But Coach Melvin had anticipated this and positioned himself in the backyard while I stayed at the front door. "Going somewhere?" Melvin's voice boomed from behind the house, followed by the sound of people running. I ran outside just in time to see Richard sprinting across my neighbor's yard with Clara close behind him. They were heading for their car, but they'd made a crucial mistake. They'd parked behind my house, which meant they had to run around the building to reach it. Coach Melvin, despite being built like a refrigerator, was surprisingly fast. He caught up to Richard just as the car dealer reached the driveway, tackling him with the efficiency of someone who'd spent 20 years coaching high school football. Richard went down hard, landing face first in the pile of manure I'd spread around my garden beds that afternoon. The impact was so spectacular that Clara actually screamed, "Get off me! This is assault!" "Actually," I said, walking over with my phone recording everything, "this is a citizen's arrest. You broke into my house, which makes you a burglar. Coach Melvin is just detaining you until the police arrive." Clara tried to help Richard up, but he was covered in so much fertilizer that she couldn't get a grip on him without getting it all over her designer dress. "Leonard, please, we can work this out," she pleaded. "We weren't stealing anything. I just wanted to get some personal items." "Personal items? Clara, you moved out 8 months ago and took everything you wanted. The only reason you're here now is because you're afraid of what evidence I might have about your affair." Red and blue lights flashed at the end of my driveway as 2 police cruisers pulled up. Officers Martinez and Thompson got out, hands resting on their service weapons as they assessed the situation. "Mr. Hayes, we got a call about a burglary?" "Officers, thank you for coming. These 2 individuals broke into my house through the bedroom window. My security cameras recorded the entire incident." I showed them the footage on my phone. Clara and Richard approaching the house, the sound of breaking glass, and their voices discussing stealing papers from my desk. Officer Martinez looked at Richard, who was still covered in manure and trying to wipe fertilizer out of his eyes. "Sir, is this your residence?" "No, but I was invited. Tell them, Clara." Clara looked at the officers, then at Richard, then at me. I could see her calculating the costs and benefits of lying to police officers versus admitting to breaking and entering. We just wanted to retrieve some personal property, she said finally. By breaking a window? Officer Thompson asked. Ma'am, that's burglary, regardless of your relationship with the homeowner. Officers, I interjected. I'm willing to not press charges if they agree to pay for the broken window and promise to stay away from my property. I think they've learned their lesson. This was strategic generosity. Having Clara and Richard arrested would have been satisfying, but having them owe me a favor was more useful in the long run. Richard looked like he wanted to argue, but Clara grabbed his arm. We agree. We'll pay for the window and stay away. I want that in writing, I said, and I want you both to understand that my security cameras are recording 24 hours a day now. If either of you comes near my property again, I won't be so generous. The officers took statements from everyone and left after confirming that Clara and Richard would cover the repair costs. As their taillights disappeared down my street, Coach Melvin clapped me on the shoulder. Leonard, remind me never to get on your bad side. You just turned a burglary into a public humiliation and a signed confession. The night's not over yet, Melvin. Clara's friend Brenda has been texting everyone in town about this drama. By tomorrow morning, the whole story will be public knowledge. I was right. By Friday afternoon, the tale of Clara and Richard's failed burglary attempt had spread through Millbrook like wildfire. But what I didn't expect was how the story would evolve as it passed from person to person. By the time it reached the school board, Clara had allegedly tried to steal important documents. By the time it reached the local Facebook groups, Richard had been arrested for breaking and entering. By the time it reached Richard's wife Linda, the story included details about his affair that I'd never shared with anyone. Clara's carefully constructed social image was collapsing faster than a house of cards in a hurricane. Her friends stopped returning her calls. Her favorite restaurants suddenly had no available tables. Even her hair salon claimed to be fully booked for the next 6 months. But Clara and Richard weren't finished yet. Desperate people do desperate things, and they were about to make one final catastrophic mistake that would give me the perfect opportunity to teach them the most important lesson of their lives. The end came on a Friday morning, exactly 1 week after Clara's goodbye text had started this entire mathematical equation of revenge. I was in my classroom, preparing for my first period advanced calculus class, when Principal Dorsey knocked on my door with an expression I'd never seen before, part concern, part excitement, and part barely contained glee. Leonard, you need to see this. Channel 8. News is in our parking lot, and they're asking about you. Through my classroom window, I could see a news van with a satellite dish, along with a reporter I recognized from the morning show. Standing next to the van, gesticulating wildly, were Clara and Richard. What are they saying? I asked, though I had a pretty good idea. Clara called the news station last night. She's claiming that you've been harassing and stalking her, that you used your position at the school to publicly humiliate her, and that the school administration should investigate your conduct. I almost laughed. After everything Clara had done, the affair, the theft, the lies, the attempted burglary, she was trying to play the victim card one more time. Mrs. Dorsey, do you mind if I handle this directly? Leonard, are you sure? Maybe we should call the district's legal counsel first. I don't think that'll be necessary. I have a feeling this situation is about to resolve itself. I walked outside to where the reporter, a young woman named Jessica Chen, was setting up for what looked like a live broadcast. Clara and Richard stood behind her, both trying to look like wronged parties instead of exposed adulterers. Mr. Hayes, Jessica called out as she saw me approaching. I'm Jessica Chen from Channel 8 News. We're doing a story about allegations of harassment and abuse of authority. Would you like to comment? Absolutely. But first, can you tell me exactly what allegations have been made? Jessica consulted her notes. Mrs. Hayes claims that you've been stalking her since she left your marriage, that you used school resources to publicly humiliate her, and that you've been spreading false information about her relationship with Mr. Dale. I nodded thoughtfully. Those are serious accusations. I assume you verified the facts before broadcasting them? Well, we're still investigating, but Mrs. Hayes provided some compelling testimony about your behavior. I see. And did Mrs. Hayes mention that she's currently under investigation for burglary? Or that she used funds from our joint account to finance an 8-month affair? Or that she abandoned our marriage via text message after cleaning out our bank account? Jessica's eyes lit up. This was clearly much more interesting than the story Clara had pitched. Mrs. Hayes, is this true? Clara's face went red. Those are private matters. Leonard is trying to deflect attention from his abusive behavior. Actually, I said, pulling out my phone, I have something that might interest you, Ms. Chen. It's security footage from this past Thursday night. I showed her the video of Clara and Richard breaking into my house, complete with audio of them discussing stealing papers from my desk. Jessica watched the entire clip, her expression growing more amazed by the second. Mrs. Hayes, this appears to show you and Mr. Dale committing breaking and entering. How do you explain this? We were just retrieving personal property. Leonard has been withholding my belongings. For 8 months? I asked. Clara, you moved out in secret 8 months ago. You took everything you wanted then. The only reason you came back was because you were afraid of what evidence I might have about your affair. That's when Richard made his final, fatal mistake. She's not the one on trial here, he shouted, stepping in front of the camera. Leonard Hayes is a vindictive, obsessed stalker who's been harassing my girlfriend since she had the courage to leave his abusive marriage. Jessica turned her camera toward Richard. And you are? Richard Dale, owner of Dale's Auto Sales. I've been helping Clara escape from an abusive situation, and this man has been terrorizing both of us. Mr. Dale, I said calmly. Didn't you tell me last week that you didn't know Clara was married when you started your relationship? Richard's face went pale as he realized his mistake. On camera, he'd just admitted to knowingly having an affair with a married woman, directly contradicting his earlier claim of innocence. That's not what I meant. And Mr. Dale, Jessica interjected, aren't you married yourself? How does your wife feel about your relationship with Mrs. Hayes? The sound that came out of Richard's throat was somewhere between a groan and a whimper. But I wasn't finished yet. I pulled out a folder I'd been carrying and handed Jessica a single sheet of paper. Ms. Chen, this is a statement from the manager of Clara's apartment building. It confirms that she's been living there for 8 months, that she's been entertaining multiple male visitors, and that she violated her lease agreement by subletting the apartment without permission. Jessica scanned the document quickly. This contradicts your claim that you only recently left your husband, Mrs. Hayes. Leonard is manipulating the evidence. He's trying to destroy my reputation. Actually, Clara, I think you destroyed your own reputation when you decided to have an affair, steal money from our joint account, and then break into my house when you got caught. I turned to face the camera directly. Ms. Chen, I want your viewers to understand something important. I'm not the villain in this story. I'm a high school math teacher who spent 12 years in what I thought was a loving marriage. My wife chose to have an affair, chose to lie about it, chose to steal money to finance it, and chose to abandon our marriage via text message. When her lies started to unravel, she chose to break into my house and then chose to call your news station with false accusations. I paused, looking directly at Clara. Every choice has consequences, Clara. You taught me that. The only variable you forgot to solve for was my refusal to be a victim. Jessica turned back to Clara and Richard, who were both looking like they wanted to disappear into the ground. Mrs. Hayes, Mr. Dale, do you have any response to these allegations? Clara opened her mouth, then closed it, then opened it again, without making any sound. Richard had already started walking toward his car. I think, Clara said finally, we should go. They left together, Clara's designer heels clicking frantically across the parking lot as she tried to keep up with Richard's desperate retreat. Jessica turned back to me. "Mr. Hayes, this has been quite a revelation. Is there anything else you'd like to add?" "Just this. I teach mathematics, and mathematics is about finding solutions to complex problems. Sometimes the most elegant solution is simply to let people reveal their true character to the world." The story aired that evening on the 6 o'clock news, complete with the security footage of Clara and Richard's break-in attempt and Richard's on-camera admission of adultery. By Saturday morning, it had been picked up by 3 other regional news stations and had gone viral on social media. Richard's car dealership was flooded with negative reviews and boycott threats. Clara was fired from her recruiting job after the video reached her corporate headquarters. Her apartment manager used the news footage as evidence to break her lease and evict her for violations. But the most satisfying consequence came on Sunday morning when I received a text message from an unknown number. "Leonard, this is Linda Dale, Richard's wife. I wanted to thank you for opening my eyes to what my husband really is. I've filed for divorce and I'm taking half of everything he owns, including the car dealership. I thought you should know that justice has a way of multiplying itself." I was sitting in my living room, drinking coffee and grading papers, when Coach Melvin knocked on my door. "Leonard, you magnificent bastard. Have you seen the local Facebook groups this morning?" He showed me his phone. Clara and Richard had both deactivated their social media accounts, but the screenshots of their posts, photos, and messages had been preserved and shared hundreds of times. The entire timeline of their affair, their lies, and their downfall was now permanently documented in the digital memory of Millbrook, Maine. "So what's next?" Melvin asked. "You've solved the equation, defeated the villains, and restored your reputation. What does the conquering hero do for an encore?" I looked around my house, not our house anymore, and realized that for the first time in months, I felt completely at peace. "I think," I said, "I'm going to teach some calculus tomorrow morning and see if I can help a few teenagers understand that every problem has a solution if you're willing to do the math." Clara had taught me something valuable after all, that the most devastating revenge isn't violence or cruelty, but simply allowing people to face the natural consequences of their own choices. The variable she'd forgotten to account for was that Leonard Hayes wasn't just a mild-mannered math teacher. He was a mild-mannered math teacher who understood that in the equation of life, truth always balances the books in the end. 6 months later, I heard through the Millbrook Gossip Network that Clara had moved to Boston and was working as a waitress under her maiden name. Richard had lost the car dealership in his divorce and was selling insurance in a town 2 hours away. They were no longer together. Apparently, relationships built on betrayal don't have much structural integrity when the excitement wears off. As for me, I got a commendation from the school board for maintaining professional dignity under personal adversity, a raise that reflected my 15 years of dedicated service, and a reputation as someone you definitely didn't want to cross. But the best part was the lesson I'd learned, that sometimes the most elegant solution to a complex problem is to simply step back and let mathematics do what mathematics does best, reveal the truth through the careful application of logic, evidence, and inevitable consequences. Clara had tried to subtract herself from my life equation, but she'd forgotten that in mathematics, every action has an equal and opposite reaction. She'd solved for x by eliminating herself from the equation, but the value of x turned out to be much higher than she'd calculated. The only variable she'd forgotten to solve for was me.